The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the truck stop parking lot as Marcus "Bull" Henderson guided his Harley into a space near the diner. At 52, with a salt and pepper beard that reached his chest and arms covered in ink, Bull had spent the last 27 years riding with the Iron Brotherhood MC. He looked every bit the part of what Hollywood might cast as a dangerous outlaw. Leather vest adorned with patches, chains hanging from his wallet, and a permanent scowl etched into his weathered face. But appearances, as Bull had learned throughout his life, could be deceiving. He'd been on the road for 6 hours, heading back from a charity toy run in Sacramento. His back ached, his throat was dry, and all he wanted was a cup of bitter truck stop coffee and maybe a slice of whatever pie they had sitting under those plastic domes on the counter. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt like a blessing after hours of rumbling highway noise. That's when he heard it, a soft, choked sobbing coming from somewhere nearby. Bull swung his leg over the bike and stood, his knees popping in protest. The crying was coming from the side of the building, near the dumpsters where the lighting was poor and the asphalt was cracked and uneven. He hesitated. In his years on the road, he'd learned that sometimes the smartest thing to do was mind your own business. But something in the quality of that crying, desperate, frightened, young, made his feet carry him toward the sound before his brain had fully agreed to the decision. Behind a battered pickup truck, he found her. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, small for her age, with dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come half undone. Her pink t-shirt was dirty, and she clutched a small purple backpack to her chest, like it was a life preserver. Tears streamed down her face, and her whole body shook with the force of her crying. Bull stopped several feet away, not wanting to frighten her further. A big man appearing suddenly from the shadows was probably the last thing this kid needed. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down to make himself less imposing. "You okay, little one?" The girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the truck's tire, holding the backpack even tighter. "Whoa, whoa," Bull said, raising his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just heard you crying and wanted to make sure you're all right. Where are your parents?" The girl shook her head violently, fresh tears spilling over. Can't tell," she managed between sobs. Have to keep going." Bull frowned. Something was very wrong here. "Keep going where, sweetheart? Where are you trying to go?" "Riverside," she whispered. "To my grandma's. Have to get there. She's waiting." Riverside. Bull's frown deepened. They were at least 80 miles from Riverside, in the middle of nowhere on Interstate 10. "How'd you get all the way out here?" The girl's face crumpled. "Walked. Then got a ride with a nice lady, but she had to turn off. Then I walked more. I'm so tired, but I can't stop. I promised." Every instinct Bull had developed over 5 decades of life was screaming that something was deeply wrong. A child this young, alone at a truck stop, walking to Riverside. It didn't add up. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," she said, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Lily, I'm Marcus, but everyone calls me Bull. Can you tell me why you're going to your grandma's by yourself? Where are your mom and dad?" At this, Lily's sobs intensified. She shook her head frantically, clutching the backpack so hard her knuckles turned white. Can't tell anyone. He said terrible things would happen if I told." Bull's blood ran cold. In that moment, he absolutely knew that he was looking at a child in danger. The question was, danger from whom? And what was in that backpack she was protecting so fiercely? "Lily, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Bull said, keeping his voice calm and steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "Whatever you're scared of, whatever someone told you, I promise you that I can help. But I need to understand what's happening. Can you trust me enough to tell me?" Lily looked at him for a long moment, her chest heaving with suppressed sobs. Bull could see her struggling with herself, wanting to trust but terrified of the consequences. "He'll hurt her," she finally whispered. "If I don't get there, if I tell anyone, he said he'll hurt Grandma." Bull felt his jaw tighten. "Who will hurt your grandma, Lily?" My stepdad, Derek." She said the name like it tasted bad in her mouth. "Mommy married him 6 months ago after Daddy died. At first he was nice, but then—" Her voice trailed off. "Then what, sweetheart?" "Then he wasn't nice anymore. He started yelling at Mommy, breaking things. And yesterday I heard them fighting really bad. And I heard something crash, and Mommy screamed, and then everything went quiet." Bull's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to stay calm, to not let his rage show on his face. "Where's your mommy now, Lily?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "I was hiding in my closet during the fight. I was too scared to come out. And this morning Derek came to my room and said Mommy had to go away for a while. He said she didn't want me anymore, but that's not true. Mommy loves me." "Of course she does," Bull said firmly. "Mothers don't stop loving their children. Ever." Derek said I had to take this to Grandma, that if I didn't, he'd know, that he has people watching, and if I told anyone, the police or teachers or anyone, he'd hurt Grandma before I could get there. He made me leave early this morning, before it was even light. Gave me $20 and said to get to Riverside however I could." Bull's mind was racing. This Derek character had sent a terrified child on an 80-mile journey, alone, with a backpack she was told to deliver to her grandmother. The explanation about people watching was almost certainly a lie meant to keep Lily quiet, but the child's fear was very real. And whatever had happened to her mother— "Lily, I need you to do something very brave for me," Bull said. "I need you to let me see what's in that backpack." "No." Lily clutched it tighter, if that was even possible. "I can't. He said I couldn't look, couldn't open it, couldn't show anyone. He said he'd know." "Sweetheart, listen to me. This Derek, he's counting on you being too scared to tell anyone what's happening. But whatever's in that bag, I need to see it so I can help you. And help your mom, and your grandma. Can you be brave enough to trust me?" Lily stared at him, tears still streaming. "You promise you can help? Promise you won't let him hurt Grandma?" "I promise I will do everything in my power to keep everyone safe," Bull said. "But I need to know what we're dealing with." Slowly, with trembling hands, Lily loosened her grip on the backpack. She held it out to Bull, who took it gently. It was surprisingly heavy. He unzipped it carefully. And then he screamed. Not from fear, from rage, from an overwhelming surge of fury so intense that he had to close his eyes and count to 10 to keep from punching the truck beside them. Inside the backpack were neatly bundled stacks of cash, tens of thousands of dollars by Bull's estimation. Beneath the money were plastic bags filled with white powder. Methamphetamine, almost certainly, and at the very bottom, wrapped in a towel, was a handgun. Derek hadn't sent Lily to deliver something to her grandmother. He'd used a terrified 8-year-old girl as a drug mule and money carrier, knowing that no cop would suspect a crying child at a truck stop. If she got caught, she'd take the fall. If she made it, he'd probably have someone intercept her before she ever reached her grandmother. Assuming the grandmother even knew anything about this. And Lily's mother. "Lily," Bull said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Did Derek say anything about your mom being hurt? Did you see her at all this morning?" "No," Lily whispered. "He wouldn't let me see her. Said she didn't want to see me. But I heard something last night. After the big crash. Like someone moaning. But then it stopped, and I was too scared to check." Bull pulled out his phone. His hands shook as he dialed 911. "What are you doing?" Lily asked, panic rising in her voice. He said, "Lily, Derek lied to you. About everything. Your mom does love you. Your grandma isn't in danger from Derek, but your mom might be. And this bag? This is drugs and illegal money. Derek used you to transport it because he's a coward who was willing to put a little girl in danger to save his own skin." The 911 operator answered. "911, what's your emergency?" "My name is Marcus Henderson. I'm at the Flying J truck stop off exit 47 on Interstate 10. I have a missing child with me, approximately 8 years old. Name of Lily, last name I don't know yet. She was sent on foot to Riverside by her stepfather after what sounds like a domestic violence incident. The stepfather's name is Derek. I need police here immediately, and I need a welfare check on the child's mother at—" He looked at Lily. "What's your address, sweetheart?" Lily, seeing that Bull was actually taking action, seemed to find a small reservoir of courage. She recited an address in Beaumont. Bull repeated it to the operator. "I also need you to know that the child was carrying approximately—" He looked in the bag again. "I'd estimate $30,000 to $40,000 in cash, several bags of what appears to be methamphetamine, and a handgun. The stepfather used the child as a drug mule." The operator's voice sharpened. "Sir, do not touch anything else in that bag. Units are being dispatched now. Stay on the line." If you believe in the power of observation, in trusting your instincts, and in the courage it takes to speak up when something feels wrong, then pause for a moment. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Bull stayed on the line with the operator while Lily sat on the ground, exhausted from fear and walking. Bull bought her a bottle of water and a sandwich from the diner, making sure she ate while they waited. Other bikers from the truck stop, seeing Bull's patches, wandered over to see what was happening. Within minutes, 6 members of the Iron Brotherhood had formed a protective circle around Lily, their imposing presence ensuring that no one would bother the frightened child. "She okay, Bull?" asked Tommy Razor Cruz, a fellow veteran and longtime member. "She will be," Bull said grimly, "once we get the bastard who did this to her." When the police arrived, 3 squad cars with lights blazing, the officers approached cautiously, hands near their weapons. A group of bikers surrounding a small child with a bag full of drugs and cash wasn't exactly a common scene. But Bull calmly explained everything, with Lily corroborating the details through her tears. He showed them his ID, his concealed carry permit, and gave them the contact information for his parole officer. Yes, he'd done time 20 years ago for assault, but he'd been clean ever since. The senior officer, a woman named Sergeant Mendoza, listened to everything and then knelt down beside Lily. "You are a very brave girl," she said softly. "And I need you to know that you did the right thing by telling Marcus what happened. You helped him help you. Now I need you to come with me to the station, where we're going to make sure you're safe, and we're going to find your mom, okay?" "Is Mommy okay?" Lily asked, her voice small. "We're checking on her right now," Mendoza said. "I'll let you know as soon as I hear anything." Bull watched as they led Lily to the squad car. Before she got in, she turned and ran back to him, throwing her small arms around his waist. "Thank you," she whispered. "You kept your promise." Bull's eyes, which hadn't teared up in years, felt suspiciously damp. "You be strong, little one. Everything's gonna be okay now." It was nearly midnight when Bull finally got the call from Sergeant Mendoza. He'd given her his number, asking to be kept informed. Technically, he had no official connection to the case, but Mendoza seemed to understand that sometimes people need closure. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "We found Lily's mother. She'd been beaten badly and locked in the basement. Derek had planned to leave her there while he fled with the money. She's at the hospital now. Broken ribs, concussion, but she's going to make it. And she got to see Lily. Bull let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. And Derek? We picked him up 2 hours ago trying to cross into Mexico. He's going away for a long time. Assault, kidnapping, child endangerment, drug trafficking, and a few other charges were still adding up. That little girl's testimony, combined with the evidence and her mother's statement, has him dead to rights. Good, Bull said simply. Mr. Henderson, Mendoza said, her voice softening slightly. I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've seen a lot of people walk past situations that needed intervention because they didn't want to get involved. You didn't do that. You saw a child in trouble, and you stopped. You probably saved that little girl's life, and you definitely saved her mother's. That takes a special kind of person. Bull didn't know what to say to that. He'd just done what seemed right. Lily asked me to give you a message, Mendoza continued. She said to tell you that you're the nicest Hell's Angel she's ever met. Despite everything, Bull laughed. Tell her we're not actually Hell's Angels. That's a different club entirely. But I appreciate the sentiment. 3 months later, Bull received a letter addressed to him at the Iron Brotherhood's clubhouse. Inside was a drawing, a child's drawing of a big man with a beard standing next to a little girl. Both figures were smiling. At the top, in careful letters, it said, "Thank you for helping me. Love, Lily." There was also a note from Lily's mother, Rachel, thanking him for saving her daughter and herself. She wrote that they were staying with Lily's grandmother in Riverside now, starting over. Lily was in therapy, but was doing well. She'd started 3rd grade and told everyone about the brave biker who helped her. Bull kept that drawing pinned to the wall of his garage, where he worked on bikes. Whenever someone asked about it, he'd tell them the story. Some of his brothers in the club started volunteering with organizations that helped domestic violence survivors. Tommy started a program bringing toys to children's hospitals, inspired by Lily's story. The thing was, Bull had learned something that day at the truck stop, something he tried to explain to the younger members of the club. It didn't matter what you looked like on the outside. The leather, the patches, the tattoos, the motorcycle. What mattered was what you did when someone needed help. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries. We bring you stories that prove heroism comes in all forms, that courage isn't measured by size or age, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Tell us in the comments, have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Your story might inspire someone else. A year after the incident, Bull was invited to a community event in Riverside. Rachel and Lily wanted to meet him again, to thank him properly. He almost didn't go. He wasn't much for sentiment or attention, but Tommy convinced him. When he arrived at the park where the event was being held, Lily spotted him immediately. She was bigger now, healthier, with a confidence that hadn't been there before. She ran to him, still small, but no longer that terrified child hiding behind a truck. "Bull!" she shouted, and he knelt down so she could hug him properly. "Hey there, little one," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You're looking good." "I'm doing really good," she said proudly. "Mommy and me, we're happy now. We're safe." Rachel approached, tears in her eyes. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," she said. "You gave us our lives back." Bull shook his head. "Your daughter's the brave one. She walked 80 miles carrying a bag she was terrified of, trying to protect you and her grandmother. That's courage. I just made a phone call." "You did more than that," Rachel insisted. "You stopped, you listened, you cared about a stranger's child. Do you know how rare that is?" Bull didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. As the afternoon went on, Bull watched Lily play with other children, laughing and running without fear. He thought about all the ways that day could have gone differently. If he'd been 5 minutes later, if he'd decided to mind his own business, if he hadn't trusted his instincts that something was wrong. But he had stopped. He had listened. And sometimes, that was all it took to change everything. On his way home that evening, riding his Harley through the desert sunset, Bull thought about perception and prejudice. How many people had probably seen Lily at that truck stop and looked away? How many had seen Bull, big, tattooed, wearing his MC patches, and assumed he was the threat rather than the help? The world was full of people who judged by appearances. But the world was also full of people who saw past the surface, who paid attention, who acted when action was needed. Bull decided he wanted to be the second kind of person. He always had been, really. The leather and the patches and the motorcycle, those were just the costume. Underneath was just a man who believed that when you saw someone in trouble, you helped. Period. It was that simple and that complicated. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tommy. "Next toy run is in 3 weeks. You in?" Bull smiled and texted back. Always. Because that was the thing about being part of a brotherhood, whether it was the Iron Brotherhood MC or the larger human brotherhood. You showed up. You helped. You protected those who couldn't protect themselves. And sometimes, if you were lucky, you got to be someone's hero. Even if you didn't look like what people expected a hero to look like, especially then. Thank you for watching. If this story reminded you to trust your instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the power of paying attention, please share it. Subscribe to Bike Diaries for more stories that prove heroes are everywhere. Courage comes in all forms, and sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done in Bull's place?